So if we could tap and just create millions of dollars, we would all be millionaires. And I think most of you watching this would be millionaires. But that's kind of the messaging or the idea I get sometimes from some of the comments people leave and some of the questions and concerns I get. So I'm very happy to have Fay Chan with us today. Fay, thanks for being here.
Hi, Evan. I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. And we are here to discuss EFT as it relates to money in the real world. And
Yeah.
I say it that way because of how I find it often presented. Why, even though I have a lot of tapping on this channel, I have almost no money videos for this reason. I probably kind of flush that out. And I feel like Faye is uniquely qualified to have a good conversation about this because of your mix of expertise and background. If you wouldn't mind elaborating a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So prior to me becoming a certified practitioner for tapping, I was actually a household budgeting coach. So I worked a lot with a lot of families here in Melbourne, Australia. Um, and prior to even having my own coaching business in finances, I was actually at a finance company doing budgeting for clients at the
Wow.
coalface. So, and until I started that job, that was pre-baby, um, I didn't know how many people had no idea about money.
Yeah.
And even though money was actually simple, like a sixth grader can do a budget for you. You have this much minus this much, you're left with this much, right?
Yes.
It's very simple math, but somehow, as adults running in a adulting life, it just doesn't compute.
Yes.
And what I've seen through my years involved in money and finances, in terms of coaching, as well as the household budgeting, as well as my work experience, is that people are really gripped by the meaning of money, right? And it's one of those sort of delusions and illusions that that allow us to hope, to pray, to want, to wish, but people aren't dealing with the rigor and the reality of the fundamentals, right? Which is what you've got and what you haven't got.
Yes.
Is your budget in the green or in the red? Red being in the minus, because there's still power in knowing that you've got a minus number, because then you can do something about it. But people run around avoiding knowing what that number is. They don't want to know. It's always oh, it's about this or roundabout, or I know what this and this is, but I don't know what all the other stuff is. Right. And I still, on occasion, get referrals from mortgage brokers and financial planners, because they've worked with you previously. And when I work with those clients now that come through with budgets, I make it compulsory that they tap with me. No
Mm.
tapping, no budgeting. All right. And so it's quite a unique mix, because as much as it is about money, you could replace it with chocolate, or replace it with an unwanted habit, or replace that with, I don't know, this pain that keeps going on your right shoulder, and you've seen all sorts of health practitioners and they can't shift it. So it's something metaphysical that's actually actualized um, in your real life. So it's symptomatic, the patterns are there, it's habitual, and it is repeated pretty much in every area of your life. So when clients rocked up, this is when I was working for the finance company, if they rocked up late and didn't communicate, I bet you they paid their bills late and didn't
Mm.
communicate,
Hmm.
right? So you can extrapolate how they are in one area of their life that they do like into another area of their life, because it's them still doing the operations. Right. So yeah, it's very it's fun watching that and observing that. Um, but it requires, if you want to get your money up to a stage where it's there for you to build on. The foundations need to be right. So that works really well with EFT tapping, right? Because we're
Oh yeah.
looking at the fundamentals.
That's the most interesting part to me, and I'm curious your take on this because what I feel like I see a lot, especially in comments and things on YouTube or maybe messages I will get, is
Mm-hmm.
where EFT falls into some people's minds, if not a lot of people's minds, into what I would call a type of money avoidance, where it's not so much like let's tap to do this in a very practical way, like you're talking about. Like I'm feeling fear of looking at my budget. Let me tap
Yep.
on that. It's a lot more of let me tap so that can create money somehow, which will just kind of alleviate all of the practicalities. Which even if it
Yes.
worked, ironically, like let's say you tapped with me and you did a quote unquote great job and $1 million fell from the sky, I still would have to pay taxes on that. I would still have to budget that. It wouldn't actually obfuscate the realities of money, but the form I
Mm.
feel I hear it the most is some flavor of I've been tapping for X number of years and I still have money issues, or why hasn't it been quote unquote working for me? And I feel like
Yeah.
very rarely would that conversation be, well, yeah, I look at my budget and I tap on the resistance and then I tap on these very specific aspects. It's like this very broad thing. Is that something you've observed as well?
Um, it's more that people like to repeat affirmations
Yeah.
um, to tap away the fear, like the avoidance of it. So it's about quick, let me put, and I learnt this analogy way back in my personal development days when I was working at Landmark Education, now Landmark Worldwide,
Hmm.
is they'll go, well, it's a mud cake, but mud not like chocolate mud, but dirt mud, right? And your issue about money is like the mud cake, and you're trying to pretty it up.
Mm,
And I'll put fondant over it. I'll put icing on it. I'll put sparklers on it. I'll put some decorations on it, and I'll make it look really nice and presentable and beautiful. But you're not dealing with the mud cake, right?
very
And
interesting.
so a lot of people want to tap away the fear of the mud, and they'll go, all right, I'll dissipate the fear, but they won't deal with it. There's no action taking with it, and 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 then they'll tap about money affirmations instead,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and not really look at the tail enders. And it's hard because if you're self doing tapping by yourself, self tapping, you can't really work on the tail enders by yourself, as you would know, right? And tail enders, just for everyone watching, is pretty much the belief or the disbelief that comes up against the money affirmation. Like money will flow easily and freely to me. And
Right.
then you've got this little voice that says, no, I gotta work hard for it. I can't be a show off. What do you mean it will just flow to me? How is that possible? Right? So that disbelief as such that comes up against the affirmation is the stronger one. So it's the more you say the mini affirmation and don't do the unhooking, the more the disbelief has a stronghold. And what's my train of thought? But it's somehow when people go, well, I've been tapping on it and it hasn't disappeared. It's because they're not looking at the root cause of it. They're
Hmm.
not willing to dive deep to whatever comes up against the money affirmation or what they want to disappear. They're not looking at the frustration and diving deeper with it.
Mm,
And often when you're tapping by yourself or tapping to a video or tapping to a script, it doesn't work.
right.
It doesn't work to transform, to rewire, to unhook, right? And I've been in personal development, a tapping practitioner for the last 5 years, and I am a mentor where we both got certified at EFT Universe. And I still don't tap by myself. I tap by myself, but if I want to do the unhooking, I go get my own practitioner to do that
Same.
with,
Same here. Yeah.
right? And so when people say to me, "Oh, tapping doesn't work," I'm like, "You didn't work with a practitioner, or didn't work with a video, or didn't work with a script, or a tapping meditation app?" "Oh no, I haven't tapped at a practitioner. I've just tapped by myself." So of course it doesn't work. I'm like,
Right.
"You're right. Tapping doesn't work." And they look at me stunted, and I go, "What do you think it is? Magic?"
Yes. Well, the answer to that is yes, often. Yeah. Because it's marketed sometimes as magic.
Yeah, just because you paid 38 bucks for a script or something or other, it's not going to have you lose 20 kilos. It's not going to have you bring in $10,000, right? There's a lot more work to that for that sort of manifestation to actually rock up.
And what does it mean that it didn't work? It is the benchmark, well, I tapped and I don't suddenly have more money. Whereas sometimes if, like in this conversation with you, if the benchmark was a little bit, do I feel 10% less fear looking at my own budget? That
Yeah,
would be a much better metric to actually, I feel like more people would
correct.
feel motivated because they would be more able to observe that versus a sort of
Mm.
mystical appearance or just a magical shift in the actual dollars in the bank account.
Yeah, that's true. And also it's a step-by-step journey of that, right? As much as your fear might dissipate by 10%, 20%, and you don't get a fear of looking at your bank statement so that you can note down what it is that you spent and you haven't spent, but you still got to do the work. But then the next thing presents itself when you're looking at the bank statement and you're looking at how much your husband spent on a monthly basis. And then that presents a communication and transparency issue in your relationship.
Yes,
And then you
yes.
can go tackle that, right? And then after tackling that, you're going to go back to the budget and go through it. And then you're going to look at, oh, we've had too much takeaway, which means I need to cook more at home, right? And then that's another lifestyle adjustment over here with you, but you might not like that. So there's that for you to tackle. So the whole budgeting process or whatever process it is, that at every single gateway, there's something else to shift, right? And
Right.
so and so that's why it is very stressful and very nerve-wracking and anxiety inducing for someone to go through a budget, because not only is it about a spreadsheet plus
Yes.
minus equals, it's really about areas of your life, and it'll highlight the unworkability, because it'll highlight what you're committed to, where you spend your time and where you
Hmm.
spend your money. And it's a complete mirror shining back at you, but not only does in money, but in all different aspects. And then next thing you know, you haven't done your tax returns in the last 2 years, and that's in your head. Right, adds to the heaviness. And so you've got, it's such a huge gamut to go through that often people just go, I'll just tap to have more money. That'll
Yes.
solve the problem.
Correct. Right.
Right? So so like I do have compassion for that process.
Of
Like
course. Of
it's a
course.
lot. You don't know what's going to show up, what's going to bring up, and how it's going to reflect on yourself, your relationships, or your inner child coming back up, right?
But
So
could
the huge
we
gamut there.
definitely implore people with that what you're describing though actually works. That's what matters about it. Like it might not be as sexy, you're going to have to look at uncomfortable things, but
Yep.
you have probably very consistently seen with clients that that actually changes. And in some of the clients I've had where it was like in debt and now they're not, like you said, some of the tapping would end up being about their parents and very little about money on some of the sessions because
Yes.
the starting point of the conversation is debt. And then within 3 minutes, well, what happens when you look at the bank statement? Well, I didn't look at the bank statement. Well, what comes up when you think about the bank statement? And suddenly we're in like fifth grade or something.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, it's a huge ball of emotion anchors memories that's stored right there, and money just happens to be the trigger, right? Now, it doesn't mean there's no incremental improvements, and it doesn't mean that you won't get insights if you're self-tapping, and it doesn't mean that you won't transform during self-tapping. Those possibilities are still possible, but it's not predictable that you can do that just by doing some tapping at the mirror,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, because there's a lot of space for you to hold if it's about your own life.
Yeah. And even if someone is listening and saying, well, okay, well, right now I can't work with a practitioner for whatever reason, I think they could get so much out of even just shifting the approach from
Mm.
what you're saying, instead of simply like, okay, I'm going to do the tapping for visualizing $1 million for the 100th time, to, okay, when Faye is talking about looking at my budget, some people listening are already hearing the voice going, "Ah, I wish they weren't talking about that. I don't want to do that."
Yeah, they're already 10,000 miles away with the feelings.
Yeah.
I'm like, come back to your body, come back into the room,
Yeah.
replace that with wine or chocolate or I don't know what else, your cancer, whatever it is, right? That whatever that's physical and presenting in your life that you like to shift the emotion towards. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that we're not miracle workers, but when you shift the emotion out of the way, it clears the way for your body to take the next action. In other words, you to take the next action.
And this just popped into my mind right now, but a possible theory about this is it's very popular right now. I feel like actually for some decades, these statements like money is just energy and money is
Mm.
just a reflection of your mindset, for example. Whereas an analogy I often use is no one ever thinks that if I just tap, they'll be able to play the bass behind me at a professional level. Like no one correlates that. They would see as, okay, maybe tapping would be useful because I have beliefs that it's impossible, or to help absorb some music. But it's
Mm.
fundamentally understood that this is a skill. It's going to take some practice. It's going to take a lot of
Yeah,
practice, and the tapping
yeah.
is a tool. Whereas money, like what you said, even on a sixth grade math level, but it is in your actual practical life. I think it serves to incorporate thinking about it as a skill, as a thing to become educated about. That the
Mm.
tapping and the different tools are something you implement to support you in this kind of grounded, realistic process of how much is coming in, how much is going out, versus like, hey man, it's all just energy. I just got to clear my energy, and I really think that that has become popular enough that people, and I'm not saying with any criticism because I thought this too,
Yeah.
that money gets in this special category of like the billionaires just wake up at 5 a.m. and have the right mindset. It's like, no,
Uh,
there's a lot more to it.
yeah. It's oh gosh, it's often sold as oh, how would I say it? It's often sold very for want of a better word, like woo-woo
Yes.
about how to obtain it and get it. Um, sure, it is energy. And then I saw another video the other day where they say, well, money by itself has no value because it's pieces of plastic or paper. There's coins, it's the metal. Forget about digital currency, right? You can't even see it or feel it, right? But if you're feeling money, right, it's true. Like fundamentally, like a pen, it's got it's a pen, it's got no value. But if we attribute this to be $10,000 and get agreement from everybody else that this is $10,000, then all of a sudden it's $10,000, right? Um, and and that's how manifestation actually works as such. But when they say that it's mystical, whatever, I don't think there's rigor there, because when you're talking to someone that's really quite spiritual and grounded, it's always very straight.
Yes.
It's very, there are grays, but it's very rigorous, black and white. You either do or you don't do. It's like you can't be a little bit pregnant, like you can't be a little bit late. You're either late or not late. You're either speeding or not speeding. You're either pregnant or not pregnant. You can't be a little bit. And so when you're talking about money and the mystics or the energy or the abundance of money, it needs, and you want to create it with the integrity, you have to be quite rigorous and grounded in who you are, how you speak, what it is and what it isn't. And so I think that's a true mark of something, of a spiritual swordsman as such, right? Not I don't know, fairies and elves dancing
Yes.
in the, I don't know, in the garden. Nothing wrong with that, right? But I'm going, if you think of money as something that's, oh, I don't know what the right word is, but I think it's more about the rigor that's really missing when you do want to create money, right? And
Yeah.
here's the thing: it's like out here in the real world, money, you need money to create money. Full stop. Like if you want to do an online course, you're gonna have the money to actually build the online course, to sell it, to even make your first buck,
Correct.
right? So, right? Or, you know, if the the ones that are rich and wealthy around the world, it's because they had the money to chuck into different multiple investments, for even risky investments, for it to churn the money. So that's, you do need to have the money to back yourself to make the money, right? They don't, it's not just, doesn't just land on your lap as such.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and it makes sense that, the spiritual component is. I like to think of spirituality, the teachers I like the most, as ones who seem to have a very seeing reality clearly, which is not to say that money suddenly becomes falling from trees. It's you're seeing all aspects of it, the energy component and the practical component, just like
Mm,
for exactly what it is. And
mm,
that's what I like about this conversation is I think my interest is always sort of this, okay, on one side there's hustle culture and it's literally just how much you grind yourself, and money is just pure unbridled capitalism and hard work, which
mm,
is toxic and ruins people's health and minds. And
mm,
but also on the other side that money's just energy, man, and it's like becomes a way of actually disconnecting. It can actually become a hiding place from the feet on the ground elements of money as they work in the real world. And the truth is always somewhere in that there is absolutely elements, like you said. I literally have a friend who gets thousands of dollars for his custom pens. So like it can be done, but he
yeah,
doesn't just throw up a big pen and put it on eBay for 10 grand. There's a
no,
whole image created around it and why this is the
right,
high end pen, and he's going to market that to people who will pay because they want the exceptional thing, like both of. So he has to have that mindset or that ability to do that, which is
yeah,
spiritual, emotional, energetic, to like I could never think to do that. I'm going to
ah,
create high
yeah,
end pens and sell them at a premium. Um,
wow,
but also, he didn't just manifest it. Like the manifestation of it involved business savvy and learning the business
mm,
and so on. So that kind of marriage of the two, I think, is where EFT becomes actually really useful when applied in the way that you were sort of describing earlier. Like, okay, I don't think I
mm,
could start a business that's high end. Okay, why? And then
mm,
the tapping becomes useful versus just the sort of affirmation, like, okay, I'm going to start my $1 million business. And like, but I don't ever want to like read or learn anything about the boring parts of actually building a business.
yeah, yeah. And you can really use EFT as you travel through that liminal corridor, because you enter one space and at the end of the other corridor is that layer that you're going to get to next, as such, that people use. And in between here and there, as you walk through this corridor where you don't know what's going to happen, you have no idea, it's completely unknown, uncertain, you're filled with fear, triggers, anxiety, you name it, right? You need to tap and take the steps and keep tapping and alleviating, and then the right people shows up to help you, and then the right website all of a sudden stumbles upon you, and you go, oh, I needed that. And then
Yes,
the right
absolutely.
the right post shows up on Instagram. You're like, hang on, I was just thinking about that. But it's because you took the action and willing to break through those little bits of emotional stagnation or blocks in between, that you can get from one end of the liminal corridor to the other end. And often people go, well, I want to skip all that. I'll tap on money affirmations and then I'll end up over there first. It's
Yeah.
like, no, it's the birth canal, right?
Mhm.
It's like, if you want to go through this corridor where you're here and you want to manifest over there, it's a corridor you have to birth through.
Mm.
And so when you take the steps, and you might, if you're a Christian and godly person, you might ask for help from God, tap to ask for help from God. He'll
Mhm.
send you the right people along the way, send you the right post,
Yeah.
send you the right da 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 da. But you, unfortunately or fortunately, have to take the step, and then the next step, and then look at the budget, and then go ask your boss for a raise, look at going to different interviews for another job, look at selling some of your stuff, look at, oh, maybe I shouldn't spend that much on takeaway, right? And deal with all the emotions that come up against that with your, be it self-tapping, tapping with a practitioner, using other modalities to help you, but you got to do the traveling,
Mm.
right? If you want to get from over here to over there. And it's possible. And it can be quick
Yes. Mhm.
or terribly slow. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But the nice thing about that is those types of magic or synchronicities, like those really do happen.
Yeah.
So we're not discounting that in the conversation. It's all just about budgets. It's like you get to sort of get the best of both worlds, because as you start to apply it practically, you do. And maybe after this, we could just think about, maybe if you have any examples, I can think of one or two where you do start to see those things, like, wow, there really is something to this. And at the same time, there is a active participation required on your part. But the great part about that whole birth canal, as you described it, is you also change in the process, which is ultimately more satisfying. Like you become the person who earns $10,000 or whatever, versus just, I'm the same Evan I was on Monday, and a $10,000 check just appeared, but I've learned nothing. I haven't changed. I haven't fundamentally grown in any real way.
Yes. Yeah. And just wishing and hoping.
Yeah.
Right. Um, yeah, I've had clients where they've come to see me about money mindset. And this one particular client, um, she kept on hitting a threshold of where she wanted to be revenue wise. And she would hit it, go a little bit above it, and then dip down again. And then do
Mm.
it again. And then, like, oh, it does pick this line of best fit. And she'll just travel like this, right? But never exponentially up or never further down, but just like this. And it was frustrating. So, regardless of what strategy she tried, what coach she did, what, budgeting she did, how she looked at her finances, what webinar she rocked up to, it never, and applied the marketing strategies, etc., it didn't work. It was still doing this. And so when we started tapping, there was a member of the family from her past that started coming up in memories. And this member of her family was one that had put her down all the time, told her she was a good for nothing. What are you doing that for? No one's going to listen to you. And that chime and rhyme of that person's voice was in the head, and the memories in the head every single time she wanted to bust through her ceiling, her glass ceiling.
Yeah.
And instead, the family members there, metaphorically, saying, no one's going to listen to you. What are you thinking of doing that for? What's the point? And so it took us, gosh, I don't know, 5 or 6 sessions to bust through that voice. Right? And then when we stopped tapping, and then I saw her a couple months later, 3 months later, she said she met all her KPIs she set for herself for the 3 months following our cessation of our 6 sessions.
Wow.
Right? So when we finished the 6 sessions, I'm like, okay, now go out and test this. And she met her goals. But who would have known?
Yes.
That that's actually what's in the way of her producing the income that she needed to in her business was actually the voice of a family member. The relationship she had with him.
That
right?
reminds. Sorry, was there more there?
No, I'm good.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing. And as you were describing that, reminded me of a pretty recent example on my side where somebody was having a similar issue around starting their own business and making their own income or growing it. And being a mom, there was an association with some very clear memories that showed up of, well, if you start working, you are abandoning the family. Or to work as a mom means you are putting yourself before your kids, even if your mind is going, well, I'm making the money for the family. Like that's what's also, as you know, with tapping, when you get into this stuff, you can't logic it away. You can't just go, well,
No.
I'm just going to make the money and the kids will enjoy the money. The imprint that's there is, if I'm working for me, I'm putting me above the family, and that's inherently bad. And since we're not starving and I don't actually need to make more, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna violate this pact I made with myself.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be a bad mom. And when that association breaks, it's like, oh, yeah, once
Yeah.
it's just an option that I can choose or not choose. That's why it's the, emotional freedom technique. It's not like force you into business technique. It's like now I have the freedom to do that. Should I choose?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the gift of tapping itself. That doesn't mean that they don't do what they want to do. Is that the driver isn't anxiety, fear, or struggle or stress? There's actually freedom there. Just like if I were to be working with someone about chocolate, right? And you dissipate the chocolate memory, whatever it is, then they choose when to have chocolate or when not to have chocolate, not when the power of the chocolate dictates their behavior of putting another row into their mouth. Right. So that's the beauty of tapping, when in a roundabout way, the choices aren't taken away from you. It's more the alleviation of the pressure and the drivenness or the anxiety or the fear, so that you can make that freely for yourselves.
Yeah. Do you have any other places you like to, if there is a consistency as far as starting people who come to you, or maybe it's a little more broad and there's just like questions you're getting, maybe even comments on this video of like, hey, where do I start? I feel like being able to look at your numbers is a great one. And I actually remember doing a workshop with a colleague of mine for musicians, and that was our thing. Like, okay, well, what are your numbers? And we had to stop doing that because no one would do it. They just wouldn't turn it in, and we didn't know like tapping and everything. Like, okay, I guess we have to abandon this ship. So I know that that's a strong one with people. But any other like
Yeah.
recommended starting points for people to explore?
Maybe just even have your bank statements on the screen in front of you, caught up, right? And just tap. and just tap and write down the thoughts that come up about your own bank statements. So the thoughts will give it away
Interesting.
as
Yeah.
to what the blocks are, where you need to concentrate, what you need to look at. And the triggers, the bank statement. Just bring it up, look at the balance, look at the items, the line items there, look at how much you've spent, how much you haven't spent, and just tap and and see what sensations fire up in your body,
Mm-hmm.
how you feel about it, how you criticize yourself about it, what you ruminate about, what the thoughts are, what you're saying. And does it sound like your mum that's saying it to you? Does
Yeah.
it sound like your husband that's saying it to you? Does it sound like me when I was a little girl? Like, who's saying those things to you? And all it takes is looking at a bank statement. So start there.
and and I promise, if you're watching this and you're like, I can't even look at it, I'm sure you're not the only one, but there's always like a step back you can go, like go to the website of the bank and don't log in. Like whatever you can get yourself to,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
always like one level you can get to, even the thought of it. Because you never want to
correct.
feel like, well, I just can't, like money's just too overwhelming for me. There's always some place you can
Yeah,
start that with.
yeah. Like I remember when I was working at the finance company, I had a lady come in with a shopping bag full of unopened letters, like bank statements,
Mm,
fines, gas bills, car bills, whatever bills, all still sealed in the envelope. So I sat her down. I said, "Well, this is your pair of scissors. This is mine. Let's start opening." So when you're doing it together, it's easier. So we started cutting open this and just putting it into piles on the floor. Right, that's for gas. That's for right, and and at the end it was just like this paper everywhere
yeah.
and piles on the floor, and we had to go through it. But it's easier when you go through it with someone, because I can't fathom her doing this by herself when she can't even go to open it.
Right. Right.
So if you're listening to this, you're like, oh, I'm that. It's like, well, it's not. Be it that if you're in Australia, you might go to um, see whether you can get some financial counselling at some charities or churches that have those financial arms, like the Salvation Army or
Hmm.
Family Life, to help you process your letters, like to help you open your letters even, right? But you need someone to help you. If you're at that level, forget about trying to do it yourself.
Yeah.
But if you're at the level where you're still functioning, everything's still being paid for, there's no late bills or nothing, but you're just frustrated about what's next, then start with your bank statements, tap on that. And if you find that there's a persistent thought or persistent pattern that turns up, then that's when you can reach out. Reach out to an EFT tapping practitioner or whatever modality you want to go to, and just reach out and start. And start.
That's great. And how did they reach out to you? I'll also put links below this, but do you have any recommended places to find you?
Um, did I send you my link tree? My link tree link. So
You can. I'll put it on.
yeah, so you can reach. So that would give access to booking a discovery call with me, my Facebook page, my Instagram page, my YouTube channel. Sometimes I put videos up there as well. So I'll give you my link tree link as such. But
Great.
yeah, I don't have a website still.
No problem.
Yeah, and I work online,
Great.
so it doesn't matter where you are. Like, you're currently where,
Yeah,
Evan?
just outside New York City.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm in Melbourne, Australia.
Yes.
So if we can somehow make the time zone fit, we'll find a slot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can reach out that way.
Yeah, great. And I recommend doing that because I noticed that as a musician, when I work with musicians in particular coming to me with, musician questions.
Yes.
There's a certain thing I can bring that they don't get with other practice. Because it's like, I know that
Correct.
being
Yeah.
on the plane, you just got off the plane and now you're in, like when I was telling you, I played at the Melbourne Jazz Festival. Like no
Yes.
one else really knows what the reality is of that.
Mm.
And, so Faye being someone with like this sort of hands-on dealing with people with money, in addition to tapping, I think I'm sure adds a layer that is just, it just adds something to it. So it's definitely, a really potent combination. And I hope people reach out to you after hearing this.
Thank you, Evan.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anything else you want to share, or do you feel like that's a good place to wrap it?
I think that's a good place to wrap it, actually. We've covered a
Awesome.
lot of ground in a very short time, actually.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, thanks so much for being here with me, and thanks to everyone for watching. And hope you learned something. And reach out to Faye and let us know what you thought.
Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.